The key to your entire Christian life is your faith. It is the very foundation upon which everything else is built. Think about it for a moment. Faith is how you were saved. It is how you entered into a personal relationship with God through His Son, Jesus Christ. When you come to God in prayer, there is always the issue of faith. When you ask for healing or guidance, there is always the issue of faith. In fact, your entire daily life is an expression of faith. Every single day, you are living out either your belief, your doubt, or your unbelief. Yet, in spite of knowing how vital faith is, there is one aspect of it that all of us have to deal with continually. We do not like to deal with it. We would prefer to eliminate it once and for all. But somehow, we struggle to do so. We find ourselves facing what we call a wavering faith. To understand this better, let us look at the words of James in the first chapter of his letter. He was writing to people who were going through immense difficulty, hardship, and persecution. He begins with a statement that seems to defy human logic. He says to consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. He explains that the testing of your faith produces endurance. This endurance is meant to have a perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. But James also adds a stern warning. He says that if you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously. However, when you ask, you must ask in faith without any doubting. He describes the person who doubts as being like the surf of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all their ways. The context of these words is crucial. James was writing to encourage people in the midst of pain. When he says to count it all joy, he is not suggesting that we should be happy about the pain itself. No one rejoices over a broken heart or a lost job. Instead, we are called to rejoice over what the trial is producing. God has a specific purpose for the periods of testing in our lives. That purpose is to ensure that we come through the fire with a stronger faith and a purer heart. These are the two end results that God always has in mind when He allows us to go through difficulty. He is using the pressure of life to produce endurance. Endurance is the capacity to hang in there. It is the ability to be steadfast and constant, no matter what the world throws at you. This kind of endurance requires faith. It is a faith that must be tested, because all of us will face valleys where we must learn to walk until God sees fit to bring us to the end. Endurance is God's way of equipping us. He is making us fit to do the very thing He created us to do. When the Bible speaks of being complete, it is not talking about sinless perfection. It is talking about a continuous maturing process. God is enabling you to achieve whatever He has called you for. But to get there, you need something more than human intelligence. You need godly wisdom. It takes wisdom beyond our own to face misunderstandings and hardships properly. If we respond with anger or resentment, we have responded in the wrong way. But if we ask God for wisdom, He gives it generously without reproach. He will not argue with you about it. He wants to give it to you. The catch is that we must ask without wavering. So what exactly is a wavering faith? It is a faith that vacillates. It is a heart that moves back and forth between saying, "Yes, I believe He will," and "I am not sure He will." One moment you are on your knees feeling certain that God has spoken. An hour later you are saying, "Oh God, I hope you will." This back and forth motion is what James calls being double-minded. It is like having two souls pulling in opposite directions. It creates a civil war within your heart. And the Bible tells us clearly not to expect to receive anything from the Lord when we are in that state. This is a strong statement that we must examine closely. Why do we weave and wobble in our faith when we know God is absolutely faithful and trustworthy? One of the primary causes of wavering faith is uncertainty about the will of God. If you do not have a promise from His Word to stand on, your feet will feel like they are on shifting sand. Now, you may not always find a specific verse for every tiny detail of life, but there is always a biblical principle that applies. Whether it is about your finances, your relationships, or your direction, the promise is there. If you are uncertain, you must start by asking, "Father, what is your will about this?" You have every right to expect God to show you how to pray. He is committed to showing you the right thing to ask for. He said that everyone who asks receives. If you seek His will, He is under a divine obligation to show you because He wants to answer you. Once the Spirit of God impresses a direction upon your heart, you can stop praying generally and start praying specifically. Another cause of wavering is when human reason runs counter to our faith. Human logic often conflicts with divine principles. For example, the Bible says that if you give, it shall be given to you. To the human mind, that makes no sense. If you are in need, logic says you should hold on to what you have, but faith says you should give. When you trust God, the sovereign and almighty Creator gets involved in your situation. His power provides for your need in ways that do not have to be reasonable. Think about the cross. How can one man dying 2,000 years ago provide for your eternal security today? It does not make human sense, but it works because He is God. Much of the Christian life is not supposed to make sense. It simply works because God is in it. If you are finding value in this deep dive into faith and want to strengthen your walk with God, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share these biblical truths with more people around the world who are searching for hope and direction. Now, let us continue exploring why our hearts often struggle to stay anchored. A third reason our faith wavers is that our feelings often overshadow our beliefs. This is perhaps the biggest problem for most people. We say we trust God, but then we say things like, "I just do not feel worthy of an answer." You must understand that you will never be worthy on your own. Feelings of unworthiness or inadequacy are a total disaster for faith because feelings change from moment to moment. If you go by your feelings, your faith will wobble all over the place. You might feel guilty about your past, even though you have asked for forgiveness. If God has promised to cleanse you from all unrighteousness, then your feelings of guilt are a lie. You must choose to believe the Word over your emotions. We also waver because we listen to the negative counsel of other people. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone has advice. But God has a unique will for your life that is not like His will for anyone else. You are a specific individual created for a specific purpose. Therefore, no one else truly knows the full will of God for you. While God can give others insight to offer godly counsel, you must ultimately have an affirmation from God Himself. If you make decisions based solely on what others want to hear, you will often make the wrong choice. People often tell you what makes them feel good, or what they think you want to hear. Seek godly counsel, yes, but ask God to affirm that counsel in your own spirit. Perhaps the most common reason for a wavering faith is focusing on the circumstances rather than the Father. When you are going through a trial, what happens to the size of your trouble when you stare at it? It gets bigger. It becomes more complex and more intimidating. The longer you ponder the difficulty, the larger it grows in your mind. If you want a sturdy faith, you must get your focus off the problem and onto the Father. You must look at your situation in the light of who God is. There is a story in the Gospel of Mark about a man named Jairus. He was a synagogue leader, a man of high position, but he came to a point of total desperation because his daughter was dying. Jairus did something that many in his position would never do. He fell at the feet of Jesus in the dirt. His desperation caused him to act differently than he ever had before. He had all the answers as a leader, but as a father, he was helpless. He asked Jesus to come and heal his daughter, and Jesus agreed. But then an interruption occurred. A woman who had been sick for 12 years touched Jesus' garment and was healed. While Jesus was speaking to her, people came from Jairus' house with a bad report. They said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" Imagine the weight of those words. In that moment, Jairus faced the ultimate test of wavering faith. His circumstances said it was over. His feelings were likely screaming with grief. But Jesus looked at him and said, "Do not be afraid, only believe." This is the point where we all find ourselves. We get a bad report. We face an interruption. We see a roadblock that seems final. But Jesus' word to Jairus is the same word he gives to us. We must choose which report to believe. Are we going to believe what we see and hear, or are we going to believe what God has said? There was a time in the ministry of Dr. Charles Stanley when he first came to lead a large church. Many people did not want him there. They made plans to get rid of him. He could hear their criticisms and feel their hostility. He would go into his prayer room and feel the weight of it all, but he felt God asking him a simple question. Are you going to believe what you see, what you hear, and what you feel? Or are you going to believe what I said? He decided to believe what God said, no matter what. He stayed focused and persuaded that God would answer his prayer. And he remained the pastor of that church for decades because he refused to change his mind when things got difficult. So how do you correct a wavering faith? It is actually very simple, though it requires a firm decision. You must make a choice. You must say, I choose to believe that God is trustworthy. I choose to believe that God is faithful. I refuse to doubt my God any longer. Notice that you are not making a decision to stop doubting your circumstances. Circumstances are often doubtful. Instead, you are making a decision to stop doubting God Himself. You are deciding that He is who He says He is, and that He will do what He says He will do. This decision anchors you. It brings the weaving back and forth to a screeching halt. To help maintain this decision, you must get into the Word of God and meditate on His promises. When you fill your mind with the things God has said, your thinking begins to align with His. It is not enough to just listen to a message once. You need to write down the promises. Let your eyes see the words, "Ask, and it shall be given you." When you see it and record it, God has something to work with in your spirit. When the enemy hits you with a negative thought and you begin to waver, you must recall the specific promise. You affirm that you have chosen not to doubt the living God. When you make this shift, the blessings of God begin to flow in your life. You must realize that nothing is working against you that He is not in control of. Do you think you have a need that He is unaware of? Of course not. He has promised to supply all of your needs according to His riches in glory. This includes your emotional needs, your physical needs, and your spiritual needs. You must decide that you are trusting Him from this point forward. This leads to a life of expectancy. You start to watch how God is going to weave you through the difficulty. It becomes an adventure. You anticipate how He will supply the need or work you through the trial. When you make specific requests and anticipate His move, you will start seeing specific answers. God has stored up goodness for those who trust Him. If you feel like you are not seeing His blessings, take this truth and burn it into your soul today. Your circumstances may not change instantly, but your heart will. And when your heart is anchored, you open the gates for God to strengthen you, purify you, and deepen your faith. You move from a state of civil war to a state of absolute peace. Your trust is in Him and Him alone. We must remember that placing our faith in Jesus is not just a one-time event that happened years ago. It is a daily practice. It is like raising a child. You have to decide every day how to participate with what God is doing. Sometimes you step in, and sometimes you step back. But you are always walking with Him. We often take for granted what we already have. If you lost the people you love or the health you enjoy, you would do anything to get them back. If you have salvation, if you have the blood of Christ covering you, then you already have everything that truly matters. You have more than it looks like on the outside. Let us ask God to deliver us from being double-minded. Let us ask Him to remove the two-soul struggle from our hearts. When we choose to believe Him, we are no longer like the waves of the sea. We become like a house built on a rock. The winds will still blow, and the rain will still fall, but the house will stand because its foundation is sure. God is the sovereign controller of this universe. He has every aspect of your life in His absolute control. You can rest in that truth. You can stop the wobbling today. Choose to believe that He is faithful. Choose to believe that His word is true. And as you walk in that confidence, you will see the glory of God manifested in your life in ways you never thought possible.